All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Libraries Open podcast. This is part three of our three-part series on ByWater Solutions partners that were honored as Library Journal Movers and Shakers for 2025. And today we are here with Jen Park, who's a government relations specialist at the Ramapo Catskill Library System. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Is this your first podcast experience?
This is my first, and I'm really excited.
Yay! Oh, that's so exciting. Well, welcome. Welcome to the show. So, we have a lot we want to talk about today as far as the award and everything that you do. But first, we usually, ask our guests to talk about how you got into the library world. What was that path like for you and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I never envisioned really being in the library world, right? That was not a career choice that was provided to me when I was growing up. I am from New Jersey. My husband and I moved to Michigan when he was a grad student for Michigan State University. And during that time, leaving family and friends behind, I found myself in the public library a lot. It was 2008 during the recession. Michigan was hit really hard. And so finding a job was a bit difficult. So I would borrow all the movies and all the books from the public library, but I would also just want to sit there and be among the community and just be among people. And while I was sitting there one day, I kind of looked around and it occurred to me that working here would be quite nice rather than just being a frequent flyer. And so I looked into how to get a job at the library, and I found that I actually needed a master's degree. And I applied for library school that year and engaged with the program at Wayne State University. And pretty much the rest was history.
Wow. So I love that that was one good thing about the 2008 recession was that it led you to where you are today. That's awesome. So I'd like to get into, yeah, what exactly you're doing now. So obviously you're a government relations specialist, and that is not something that you see at every public library by any means. So could we get a little more into that and talk about how you landed in that particular role and what that entails?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my background is predominantly libraries, very heavily in the academic sector. So, I served on the faculty for a four-year institution. I was also in public libraries prior to being in the academic library, and I wanted to just do something bigger. I wanted to serve more people, just help more people, and that's when I made the move to the public library system. So the public library system in New York, there are 23 public library systems within the state, and they're there to support member libraries. So the Ramapo Catskill Library System, we have 46 member libraries that we support. And so I figured my reach there would just be greater than serving in the academic world. So after moving to the system in an outreach capacity, we were meeting with elected officials as we do for advocacy every year. It's a practice that many of the New York State libraries conduct. We have annual meetings with elected officials and we discuss what is occurring in our sector of the world, right? And perhaps how they could help us and what are our financial concerns, what are the trends that we are seeing and so forth. And so being in that realm and having those conversations, I really enjoyed having those open and honest discussions with our strengths, our concerns, and where we would like some assistance from our elected officials. Um, Having conversations then with my executive director, who said, this hasn't really been done before, but I think it's necessary for us to do. We just took a look at how to make this position a reality, right? It would be adding on to the organization. It was having conversations with our board of trustees, um, and really determining if it would be a good fit. And not to get too into the weeds here, but my background, as I stated, was not in political science, right? It was as a librarian. So I also never lived in New York. I've only lived in New Jersey and Michigan. So I wasn't familiar with the landscape there, the legislative landscape. So we reached out to one of our assembly members Assemblyman Brian Miller, who is absolutely fantastic and brought me on as an intern. So I was embedded into his office for a couple of days a week over the course of about 6 to 8 weeks. And I really learned how things work up in Albany, in New York's capital. And that experience allowed us to gain further insight and information and really understand why it was necessary to have this position for our library system.
So I just have to stop for a second because it's so interesting to me when you say that you didn't actually live in New York, you lived in, or you still do live in New Jersey, and I'm in Florida. So it's just so funny to me because we're such a huge state geographically that like I can't imagine just like driving to another state for work, you know, and having to learn the different laws and rules and regulations and legislation. That just seems like it would have its own unique set of challenges. And so that's really interesting that you said that. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit more too about now, the day to day of what you do and, how much, I mean, are you, yeah, having to go to, legislative events like every day, every week? What does it look like exactly? I mean, how often are you actually in the library? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, well, no two days are the same, right? As happens in the library world. That's just the reality of our profession. So my role is as a government relations specialist, I am not just liaising with our elected officials, right? I am also assisting our member libraries in the way of anything legislative related, if there are any concerns with forthcoming legislation or legislation that has been introduced, what it means for them and their operations, what it means for the members of the community, what it means financially. That's been a really big thing, right? And so working to have those open conversations and to strategically assist with a path forward has been of great value. I also provide professional development sessions for our member libraries, as well as the trustees of those libraries, so that they are knowledgeable in what is occurring, not just at the state level, but also now at the federal level, right? So there's been a focus on perhaps what is happening down in Washington, D.C., how that's going to trickle down to the residents of the member libraries and what that means for them, not just financially, but also service-wise and programmatically. So those are areas that I focus on.
And how have you navigated that recently? Because as you just said, it has been a trickle down effect in recent months. And I have seen a lot of different, because we work with partners all over the country. So there's been different ways of dealing with that and communicating these things to the users. So how have y'all dealt with that as far as communicating this uncertainty to your users and like what the impacts might be, because it is still so unknown. How have you gone about dealing with all that?
Yeah. So we are very fact-based, especially the work that I do. I never make assumptions. We plan for all events, but there's no assuming that one particular event would happen because in that case, we cannot consider the future occurrences, that all future occurrences would take place like with all possibilities, right? Anything can happen, and we just need to be open and mindful and following what is happening at that federal level. So to have that insight and information, I do a lot of reading. I read nonpartisan nonpartisan articles, I read bipartisan articles, I read right-leaning articles, left-leaning articles. I need to have a full understanding as to what's occurring. I also need to have a full understanding of the concerns of both parties and also how we may be addressing those concerns and alleviating any sort of fears or addressing those prior to them happening, right? We want to be proactive and not reactive with what could be coming down the line. The other uh, aspect that I really focus on is my own professional development. So I am oftentimes attending sessions hosted by library advocacy groups, or other types of advocacy groups. I'm reading toolkits for advocacy, how to push out information, a lot of research studies about how to best communicate information, and so forth. So there's a lot of reading that I do in my position, as well as having conversations with people. Pick up the phone, make those phone calls to our elected officials' offices, see if they have any sort of insight or can explain a reasoning why something was introduced, legislation was introduced, and so forth.
Wow, I just can't get over how amazing it is that the library system has you to do all that. I mean, that is just so special because, unfortunately, so many systems don't. I mean, and so I think it's so wonderful that you can be such a strong advocate. And so I kind of want to touch on, you talked about some of the trainings that you give to library professionals. And I feel like this whole topic of advocacy and all that goes with it could be like a all day conversation, but I would love to just touch on, since this is a short podcast, what are some of the key takeaways or things that you impart during your lessons? Like, what are some of the main touch points that you always like to give to people when talking about advocacy?
So, advocacy is a really deep topic. And as you stated, we could just talk about it for hours on end. And that's the reality when it comes to the training sessions. So, my 101 training session is really just going back to the definition. What is advocacy? Let's go through, again, I'm in New York. So, let's go through what does the makeup of the New York State legislature look like, right? How are those people voted upon? So I really take it back to a 101 session so that people are comfortable with the processes that are in place and they have that understanding when they can have those conversations with the elected officials. One of the areas I do focus on in all of my professional development sessions is that it is so important to pick up the phone and make phone calls. Clicking on those letters that come through that say, yeah, I'm a library advocate, that's all well and fine, but it's time to do more. That was great 5, 10 years ago. And now it's time that we really, when I say have our voices heard, I mean that literally. We need our voice to actually be heard. And so breaking down um, that fear of talking into the unknown. Because when you do call an elected official's office, you don't know who the person is on the other end. And what I always like to tell people in my professional development sessions is that there are two entities that serve all people in the United States, right? The first is the government. It's there to serve all people. And the second is libraries. We are here for our entire community. And so oftentimes the person that's picking up the phone on the other end, they have gone through the same thing that the person picking up the phone in the library has gone through, right? They're helping people who need that assistance and they're finding answers for people who need that assistance. So there are so many similarities between our organizations that there should be no cause for concern when giving them a call.
So yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh my God, the phone, picking up the phone, because I'm like the classic like millennial librarian that tends to be a little introverted. That's like, I don't want to, make a phone call. But yeah, it's so like, thank you for reminding me how important that is. I mean, I feel like I'm doing enough with, every library sends something out and I'm going to fill out this form. But no, you've just inspired me to actually maybe make a phone call.
And to be honest, the person who's picking up the phone, they're most likely just going to log your call, right? It's someone whose job is to write down into literally a log, an Excel spreadsheet, who has called for what reason and what's the contact information, and that's it. So I've picked up the phone and just said, please support this particular bill, provide the bill number. Or I just want to make you aware that we are a bit concerned with what's occurring with IMLS funding the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Provide my information, and I say thank you so much and hang up.
Okay, that doesn't sound too painful. I think I might be able to do that, and some of the listeners too. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something that was referenced in the Movers and Shakers article about you, the baby bundles program. That sounds really cool, and I would just love for you to share a little bit about how you started that.
Yes. So the Baby Bundles program came from a personal area where my executive director, I had just had a baby. He's now 3.5. And so coming back from maternity leave, we wanted to do a special project. Working with one of our assembly members, Assemblyman Carl Brabenick, who's been a friend of the library for many, many years. So we posed the idea of this baby bundle project, which would be to provide new parents, literally in the hospital, with literacy information about parenthood, and what is available to them in the immediately, right? So you're up all night with this new baby. I mean, I had just experienced that. Sometimes it could be a little bit lonely, and you just want to rely on something, whether it be a TV show or an audio book or a regular book, if you're even in the right mindset to be reading at that time. So we provided information to the new parents about what is available that would complement this new occurrence in their life, right? This new miracle in their life. And we also provided a little onesie that was created by our marketing manager here at the Ramapo Catskill Library System, a book for the baby that was black and white because for initially they could only see in black and white, and just general information about the library system and that we are here for them in all of their life's iterations. So the assemblyman sponsored it. We worked closely with Westchester Medical Center, which is based out. They have two locations in our service area to produce these bundles for these new parents. And they were just so welcoming. The hospital was so welcoming to receiving these hundreds of bundles to provide to the new parents.
That is wonderful. I would have loved to have gotten something like that when I gave birth to my son. I mean, it's just such a great introduction to library services. And you said parental literacy. That's amazing.
Mhm.
So I also now I want to talk about, I know I'm shifting gears all over the place. It's a short podcast, but I want to actually talk about the Movers and Shaker Award itself and what it was like finding out that you were the recipient. How did that feel? What was going on in your head? And, just what everything that has come with that. Tell us about that.
I was so thrilled to be named a mover and shaker. This is an award. Every year it comes out the list, and I would look at it immediately and just be in absolute awe with the work that is being done across the country by those who have been named with the award. And so, having now been named with the award, when I first received the email, I was just so blown away and so excited. It took me a few minutes to process it. Because again, I just highly regard this sort of award. What has come with it, it's funny. I had so many congratulatory emails, which was just so lovely, but people who I haven't spoken with in years, and literally, I was just communicating with one of those people right before coming on and speaking with you. We reconnected because of the award in the magazine. Someone I worked very closely with, I went to library school with in Michigan. There's someone from my freshman floor of college who reached out to me, who's also now a librarian in New Jersey. So just the award, I know it meant a lot to me to have it, but then to see how many have also highly regarded the award and sent congratulatory notes that who I haven't spoken with in a while. It's so meaningful. And I just look forward to supplying more information about this position and how others can recreate it for their libraries and their library systems.
That's so awesome that it's reconnected you with people that you haven't talked with in so long. I love that. And another guest that I had on a few days ago, who's another winner, she talked about how it opened up so many new connections as well. I mean, so it's just really building these positive interactions and connections, and that just it just warms my heart so much.
Absolutely. And we're always stronger together with imparting this knowledge and information and support with one another.
Absolutely, for sure. And with that being said, I mean, does any of this, will you be attending any of the big conferences this year that, or anything like that? Any networking events?
That remains yet to be seen exactly where I'll be traveling this year. I am open to doing some travel and certainly connecting with everyone. Um, I will be up at the New York Library Association in November. That is for sure. Otherwise, for the rest of this year, it is unknown. However, I am so happy to connect with anyone across the country by phone, by video chat, just to converse about what the work is that we're doing and how we have seen very positive outcomes thanks to this position.
That is awesome. Yeah, we will definitely share any information you're willing to share in the show notes so people can get a hold of you. And I meant to ask you this before, but are some of your trainings online? Like, are they available or do you only do them in person or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will not record any of my trainings. So nothing will be recorded or shared. I will host trainings in person as well as online. It's whatever is conducive to the organization. Of course, there's always more engagement in an in-person setting. However, there's plenty of knowledge to be gained in the online version. So I'm happy to conduct those.
Okay, that's wonderful to hear. I think a lot of people would really appreciate all the knowledge that you have to share on that. And is there anything else that we didn't touch on about, Ramapo Catskill or any of the work that you're doing that you'd like to talk about some more?
Well, the only thing I want to say is, libraries, it's such a magical world, right? So no, even though you can find all the information or access all the information through the the different the different networking avenues, through resource sharing and lending, there's also so many opportunities for growth. And if you're strategic and passionate about a particular content area, I do want to encourage people to explore those areas and to have those discussions to grow careers, to grow their own careers in a professional setting that may not be traditional librarianship. Because certainly what we have learned in library school or just in different experiential learning settings, um, we all have our strengths because of that. Our strengths are different from one another, but using those strengths together, we are the strongest we could ever be.
Ah, that was so good. That was such a great note to end on. I feel so inspired by that. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you more. And yeah, we're going to share all that information about how people can get a hold of you.
That would be great. Thank you, Elise. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much.